In this recording, I want to discuss a new cancer. According to the National Cancer Institute, the United States Institute of Health, there are over 200 types of cancer forms. The most common cancers are bladder, breast, colon, rectal, kidney, leukemia, lung, thyroid, prostate. What is cancer? Cancer is a term used for diseases in which abnormal cells divide without control and are able to invade other tissues. Cancer cells can spread to other parts of the body through the blood and lymph systems. Cancer is not just one disease, but many diseases. All cancer begins in cells, the body's basic unit of life. The body is made up of many types of cells. These cells grow and divide in a controlled way to produce more cells as they are needed to keep the body healthy. When cells become old or damaged, they die and are replaced with new cells. However, sometimes this orderly process goes wrong. The genetic material, or the DNA, of a cell can become damaged or changed, producing mutations that affect normal cell growth and division. When this happens, cells do not die when they should, and new cells form when the body does not need them. The extra cells may form a mass of tissue called a tumor. The risk of developing many types of cancer can be reduced by practicing healthy lifestyles, such as eating a healthy diet, getting regular exercise, and not smoking. Also, the sooner a cancer is found and treatment begins, the better the chances are that the treatment will be successful. Are you curious about the title of this broadcast? Is there another new cancer the medical and scientific communities have discovered? Do they know the origin? Have they discovered any treatment options? What was the first case reported? How does it spread? Is it fatal? The new cancer has not been discovered by the medical and psychological communities. The church knows the origin. Treatment options are available. The first case was reported literally thousands of years ago. This new cancer is highly contagious. It is fatal to those who choose not to seek treatment. The new cancer has been diagnosed by the great physician. The items and the terms are ingratitude, thanklessness, and unthankful. Like cancer, it begins in the basic spiritual life form of the church, the saint. Like cancer, it spreads by attitude and action. Like cancer, it is abnormal, an unwanted invader that often drains the vitality from the local church. Like cancer, it develops when one practices a spiritually unhealthy lifestyle. Like cancer, the sooner this new cancer is detected, the chances for successful treatment are certainly assured. Like cancer left unchecked, this new cancer spreads and destroys the fabric of spiritually healthy relationships in the local body, the church, and the intimate body, the family. Let's look at some passages on ingratitude and see what we can learn to guard ourselves and to help the unthankful person give thanks to God, for He is good, and all He does is good, perfect, holy, and just. A brief concordance search in the New American Standard Bible shows 7 variations of the word thank, either as a noun, a verb, an adjective, or an adverb. The word thank is used 22 times. The word thanked, ed, twice. Thankful, once. Thankfulness, 3 times. Thanks, 110 times. Thanksgiving, 39 times. And thanksgiving, giving twice. We can conclude from the numerous times it is mentioned in the various forms in the Bible, God considers this word of utmost importance. Thank or thankful really does not need defining. It is self-explanatory. But I found the glib definitions insightful if one thinks more deeply about this rampant spreading cancer. Thanks is defined as expressing thanks, showing gratitude, showing appreciation, to be grateful. I usually tease my students that they have defined the word with the word. Please note two major points of consideration here. This action must be expressed and visible, expressing and showing. This is a way of life and a character trait. Be is a state of being. Could we conclude that if I am not in a state of being thankful, I will not express or show thankfulness? Let's consider some instructive injunctions about thankfulness. This is a random selection of principles drawn from Scripture. It is not designed to be an inclusive study. It is enough to warn us that we may be infected with this new cancer and spread it without knowing we are a carrier. Jesus thanks his Father in John 11:41. Jesus is under stress. We are to imitate Christ. What is our first reaction when stressful life circumstances come crashing into our lives? 1 Chronicles 16:4 records specific ministries responsible for praise and thanksgiving in the worship service. They model before Israel a proper response to the graciousness of God. What do others see in me? Do we influence people to be thankful or thankless? Music is a means of expressing our thanksgiving, Psalm 28:7. And Isaiah 38:18 and 19 reminds us that life is designed to give thanks. Once death occurs and the body is buried, thanks is impossible. Paul sets the example of being thankful for one another in passages like Romans 1:8, Philippians 1:3, and Philemon 1:4. Study these passages and discover why Paul gave thanks for these saints. Do we thank God for the people he places in our lives? During great times of distress, we lose sight of God's provisions. We only seem to see what we do not have. Yet Paul gives thanks for the compassion he was shown by others in troubling times. Thankfulness is a command according to Colossians 3:16. It is linked with allowing the word of Christ to richly dwell in us. This singing with thankfulness in our hearts to God is an expression of the word of God residing in your heart. If we are stuffing ourselves on spiritual ding-dongs, we do not have much to sing about, do we? Thankfulness is a choice. 2 Samuel 22, verse 50. It is not based on emotions, but it should be emotive. Thankfulness recognizes the divine intervention and provisions of God and purposefully proclaims him as rightful Lord before the nations. Anyone who asks me to give a reason for the hope that lies within me. As I was studying the journal on this new cancer, the Bible, I was struck with the following two propositions. When we see older folks who are thankless, I would propose that they led a life of ingratitude. Their wellspring of appreciation was dry their entire life. They lived life for themselves. When I see young people who are ungrateful, I wonder if this parched soul is because their wellspring of gratitude is poisoned by resentment, bitterness, anger, and unresolved issues. An unthankful person seldom has meaningful, lasting joy in life. Life must be thrilling, exciting, moving from one exhilarating time to the next. This level of joy, which is really happiness, is rooted in activities and people and places rather than a personal relationship with Christ that endures all pain and suffering. Philippians 4, verse 1 and following. Have you thought about the relationship between thankfulness and love? Phileo love is the type of love that acts for the welfare of another and looks for a response. Thankfulness is a way to respond to the loving actions of another. Gratitude is the biblical response to phileo. We could take up a lot more time about thankfulness, but I want to examine a phenomena that took place in Luke 17, 11 through 19. The setting is that Jesus is proceeding to Jerusalem, approaching the Passion Week and his crucifixion. As Jesus proceeds between Samaria and Galilee, he travels through a village and meets 10 leprous men. What is leprosy? Leprosy is a chronic infectious disease of humans caused by a bacterium. For many years, it was considered a mystical disorder associated with some type of curse, and persons with the disease were isolated and ostracized. The disease can affect the skin, mucous membranes, and eyes, and some of the nerves that are located outside the central nervous system. These are primarily the nerves of the hand, feet, and eyes, and some of the nerves in the skin. In severe untreated cases, loss of sensation, muscle paralysis of hands and feet, disfigurement, and blindness may occur. In Leviticus 13:2 gives a detailed description of leprosy that affirms this medical definition. In the same chapter, verse 46, it also states that the leper was to live outside the camp. Leprosy was often viewed as God's hand of punishment. In Numbers 12:10, Miriam rebelled against Moses' leadership and was struck with leprosy. So let's go back to Luke. Notice that the 10 lepers stood off at a distance and cried out. Lepers were not permitted to come in close contact with people. People believed that leprosy was an airborne disease. A leper speaking could transmit leprosy vicariously to another by being in close proximity of airspace. Notice the unified plead for healing. They raised their voices together, petitioning the Son of God to heal them. Their condition was incurable. The news of Jesus and his miracles had reached their ears. The mercy they sought from Christ was a specific intervention only he could provide. There was no other cures and no other miracle workers. Jesus saw them. This is where the real work began. Recognition of their condition. Jesus did not break any religious or cultural barriers in this cure like he did with the widow of Nain by touching the coffin of the dead son. He saw their condition. He had mercy on them, and he spoke to them. His instructions seemed very odd. He told them to go and show themselves to the priest. This was fulfilling the law given by Moses in Leviticus 14. When someone thought they were cured, it was verified by the priest. But from all appearances, none of the 10 lepers were cured, yet they were commanded to proceed to the priest for verification of something they, as of now, could not see. God wanted to cure them, but they had to do something. They had to believe and act in faith. This display of faith would begin with their very first step toward the priests. As each man proceeded, each man was cured. Please note this was not a group miracle. Each had to display their faith by acting upon what appeared to be a seeming senseless command. When they began, they had no guarantee their cure was imminent. Jesus did not say, when you guys turn around and begin walking, you will be cured. No promise made. They had to believe. Now they noticed they were cleansed, for it says that one of them, when he saw he had been healed. So their faith gave them what they so desperately desired and that no one else had been able to do for them, namely cure them from leprosy, be reunited with their loved ones, and restored to the community at large. We glean an important insight as to the nature of this group. In other words, its ethnicity. There were 9 Jews and 1 Samaritan. Life tragedies unite strange bedfellows. The Jews hated the Samaritans. The Gentiles were a low class of people. They were inferior. The Jews were disgusted by them and even their presence. They often referred to them as dogs. Yet these 10 were comrades because of their incurable disease. Jesus is amazed. Jesus is amazed that only one returned to give thanks. He asks where the other 9 were. It wasn't a Jew who returned to give thanks. It was a Samaritan, a foreigner. What made the Samaritan so thankful? Why didn't the 9 Jews return to give thanks to Christ? What can we learn about this new cancer in the church from this parable? Now, here are some thoughts. The 9 cured Jews displayed an attitude of heart of entitlement. The Jews had an esteemed, privileged relationship with the creator of the universe. He only called a Jew to be the father of the nations. The successive line of heritage was only given to the Jews. The nations would be blessed only through the Jews. The Jews, even though rebellious, were delivered from the mighty hand of Pharaoh and the Egyptians in Exodus. All the other captives from varying nations were not delivered, only the Jews. The Jews had a permanent relationship established through blood, the Passover. The Jews were given the oracles of God, the law. The Jews were to evangelize the nations around them. They were the only peoples adopted by the Creator God. The Jews were given countless covenants and conditions for blessing, whereas the nations were only promised judgment and destruction, according to Romans 9:4. The Pharisees often referred to their heritage and esteemed a position to establish their spiritual position before God. They would say, "We are Abraham's descendants." They were entitled because they were Jews. This new Jewish teacher, miracle worker, would be obligated to cure them. We are kin, we are relatives. You don't turn your back on family. They saw the miracle. They were not buffoons. Entitlement, expectations, obligations, rights. Why did only one cleansed leper return to Jesus? Someone wrote the following 9 suggestions of reasons why the other 9 did not return. One waited to see if the cure was real. One waited to see if it would last. One said he would see Jesus later. One decided that he had never had leprosy. One said he would have gotten well anyway. One gave the glory to the priest. One said, "Oh, well, Jesus really didn't do anything." One said, "Just any rabbi could have done it." And one said, "I was already much improved." The Samaritan returned because he was undeserving. He was a half-breed. His ancestors had it all wrong. Their religious premises established a religious practice, not any relationship. They were involved in performance. It was nothing personal. He knew he was hated by the Jews. He was reminded often he was excluded from the temple, the law, ceremonies, promises, and covenants. His life was hard and difficult because of circumstances, legalistic opponents, and his disease. He was hopeless. His situation was helpless. He had no expectations. He may not have expected Jesus to heal him. The 9 Jews, yes, but a Samaritan? Probably not. Thankfulness is not confined to a race of people. Jesus asks, where were the 9? They were equally, thoroughly, and completely cleansed. They knew they were cleansed. They recognized that their skin, mucous membranes, eyes, and some of the nerves were not as they were before meeting Jesus. Their hands, feet, and eyes, and some of the nerves in the skin were clear, whole, and restored. But where was their gratitude? Thankfulness is more often related to recognizing the greatness of the Lord's person as to the greatness of his performance. Like worship, thankfulness remains dwarfed in our gratitude is limited to God's performance. The problem with this entitlement is often due to the failure to see God's performance in our lives. We are guilty of confining God to the colossal, enormous, gigantic, gargantuan, the Big Bang miracles. If God never did anything else for us, no pay raise, no prevention of a car accident, no economic stimulus check or health, etc., is he not still worthy of thankfulness? Failure to elevate our understanding and practice of gratitude breaks God's heart and leaves us as brittle saints. Tom Peters writes in the business journal Management Excellence, September 9th in 91. Quote, we wildly underestimate the power of the tiniest personal touch. And of all personal touches, I find the short handwritten nice job note to have the highest impact. A former boss who had gone on a highly successful career religiously took 15 minutes at the end of each day. Whenever he'd jot down a half dozen paragraph long notes to people who'd given him time during the day or who made a provocative remark at some meeting. I remember him saying that he was dumbfounded by the number of recipients who subsequently thanked him for thanking them. End quote. Two closing thoughts. Be thoughtful and deliberate in your gratitude. I remember a former supervisor would say to each employee at the end of the shift, thanks. I often wonder, thanks for what? It was mindless and really unthinking. Reread the biblical expression of thankfulness the Spirit of God records of Paul's writings. Paul was specific. He often uses I remember with thankfulness. And then number two, even if no one else is thankful, be thankful yourself. It may take a while for this new treatment to slow the plague of ingratitude. To avoid infectious inoculation, be thankful. I remember working with a man on a job. God was so gracious to provide the work. His timing was impeccable. I would spring for lunch, drinks, and snacks. I think the closest I received an affirmation, an affirmative response was a grunt. I worked hard at being thankful and showing gratitude for God's marvelous provisions. I was not responsible for his lack of gratitude. I was totally responsible for my own. Being unthankful is discouraging and draining. Thankfulness is uplifting and encouraging. I have a homework assignment that many times I give out in counseling. It's 21 different ways that you can develop a thankful heart and a thankful spirit. If you would like this sheet with the 21 ways on it, you can cut them off and they can look like little 3x5 cards or business cards for you. Email me at the email address on your screen, and I would be glad to send it to you. There is additional teaching available at this blog spot. I trust that you'll take advantage of the efforts that we are trying to do to keep the Christian community connected, thriving, and growing spiritually. God bless.